Hello friends, for today's video I wanted to go through a list of some books that I think helps alleviate that feeling of where has all the fantasy gone. I do think it's fair to say that there is a certain kind of story at any given time that publishing tends to put a little bit more money toward, or that readers tend to gravitate towards, and thus it's kind of this feedback loop of, oh, the readers like this, let's give them more of that, readers continue to read that, and then it just goes back and forth, and certain kinds of other stories really fall back and don't get the attention that they deserve. I think over the last few years, it has really felt like a lot of the dedication from publishing and marketing has gone more toward the fantasy romance and romantasy style of books, and that some of the more epic and high fantasy has taken a little bit of a backseat. I am not of the opinion that there is nothing out there. And maybe this is because this is my job. I review books all the time. I'm constantly not only assessing trends, but I'm also looking to find the hidden gems and relay all of that information to all of you. But I do think that if you just kind of are walking into a bookstore, if you even have the privilege to live near one, but if you're walking into a bookstore and if you don't have a huge fantasy selection, chances are they're going to keep in stock the things that are popular, the things that are selling, and it can be a little bit harder to kind of sift through and find what you're looking for. So I actually did a part 1 to this, which I'll have linked if you would like more book recommendations besides just the ones I'm mentioning today that fall into this idea of there are other books out there that do feel like high fantasy, that do feel like epic fantasy, that do feel like genre benders. There are the ones out there, and here's a list of them. So I'll have that part 1 linked, and then for today we're going to go through 5 different ones. If I have any in-depth reviews for these, I'll have them linked, but without further ado, let's jump into it. It's important to note that I am specifically highlighting books that have come out within the last few years, because of course if we go to backlist fantasy, I feel like that's almost cheating, because naturally backlist and classic fantasy is going to feel different than what's popular now. So I'm specifically highlighting the ones that have come out as of late, but maybe didn't get the same level of intensity in their marketing and the same level of money behind it. So kicking it off, I'm actually going to start with a couple of books that came out last year, and they were books that completely escaped my radar, and when I discovered them and I read them, I thought, I actually quite liked these. I liked these quite a bit, and I think a lot of other people will like these too. So the first one I'm going to mention would be A Resistance of Witches. I'm going to give the most basic synopsis for just a second, because when I said this to my husband, his response was like, yeah, let's go. And the synopsis is basically, what if some witches were fighting Nazis? That's the synopsis. That's pretty much all you need to know. I'll elaborate a little bit in a moment, but if you want to skip ahead to the next one and be like, I too like your husband, that's all I need to hear, then, feel free to skip ahead. But when I jumped into it, I knew nothing about it. I didn't even know that was a part of it. I just saw Resistance of Witches and I was like, I don't know what this is, but I am kind of making my way through a lot of the books that were Goodreads nominees, and this was one of the ones that I had not really heard that much about. And we can talk all about how we kind of get stuck in our own bookish bubbles, and that's partially my fault for not realizing that this one existed. But when I checked it out, I was very pleasantly surprised. I had such a great time with this one. It's also a standalone, though I could see the author maybe writing more in this world if they wanted, because it was a lot of fun and I would really, really enjoy coming back to it. If I'm not mistaken, I think it was also a debut, and it was great. It was a fantastic debut. So besides just that very basic setup of what if witches were fighting Nazis, you are looking at a secret society of women who for years and years and years have not interfered in the plights of mankind in any capacity, because if they are to be discovered, most of mankind will hunt them and kill them. They've seen this happen before. They learned their lesson. But our main character's mentor is seeing what is happening in Germany and what Germany is doing to a lot of the rest of Europe and the threat that they pose pretty much to the entire world. And she decides, because she is kind of the head of this Academy of Witches, she makes the decision to reveal themselves to Churchill and decide to push back against Hitler and the Nazis. And our main character, after some things happen early on, is finding that there seems to be an awareness, not just that the witches exist from Churchill, but from the Nazis themselves. In fact, some people might be defectors, and there are some witches that might actually be serving the other side. And it also incorporates certain ideas of the search for valuable and potentially magical artifacts from this opposition, and the threat that would pose if it turned out they did stumble upon something that really held a lot of power. So our main character is doing everything she can to stop any of that from happening. There are also some side characters in this story that I thought really, really shined. Each of the individual characters had their own distinct personalities. I liked the writing, I liked the plot progression, I liked the pacing. I had a blast with this book, and it's obviously very different from a lot of the other things that have been popular over the last few years. Our second one that came out just last year would be The Sirens. I would categorize this more as contemporary fantasy. It feels a lot more contemporary with sprinkles of fantasy. You could almost argue it's magical realism to some degree, but I would say more so contemporary fantasy. We are looking at a couple of different timelines. One of them follows our protagonist who, after something occurs on campus, she seeks out her sister. She doesn't know what she's going to do with her life. And she's also really scared that everything is going to change moving forward because something happened with a young man at the university she was going to. And when she comes to find her sister is nowhere to be found. She's not in her house. It looks like maybe she was there recently. Neighbors recall her sister saying she'll be home soon, so if you just kind of want to hang out, that's fine, but she should be back in about a week or so. But the more time that passes, the more that not only our main character starts to question what happened to her sister, but she's also starting to discover a lot more about this particular town her sister's been living in, and also all of their family. In addition to this, you have another perspective that is from years ago. They are women who are imprisoned that are being sent to Australia from Europe, and they are being held prisoner. And you are seeing a lot of the women that are being held on the ship are facing disgusting, horrible circumstances. And the things that left them within this, that put them in this position, are also things that are really not fair. They're very unjust. And so you're kind of trying to figure out how all of this comes together and correlates, and what's the connection between this and the present day and our characters and these two sisters. As you can see from just that description, already it doesn't necessarily feel particularly fantasy leaning, except for it does feel like there's perhaps something magical that is connecting this all, and as the name gives away, one of those magical things might be something to do with sirens. This is very much an examination of the ways that throughout history, the things that have happened to people as a result of assaults, of not being submissive, of just trying to live freely, how all of that is viewed as punishable, sometimes by death, sometimes by horrific circumstances, and other times by the complete derailing of your life. And so you're kind of examining through these two different timelines and also these two different characters how this is present, not just from the past, but the current day as well. Completely switching gears, next up we have an epic fantasy like the previous two. The third installment of the series also came out in 2025. However, the first couple came out the couple years before that. So that means that the trilogy is complete. Having completed the trilogy, I can say that I think there will be more in this world, given how some things leave off, but this current arc, I would say, is complete. So within this, you follow the Hawksburg Guild, and one of the main things within this story is almost this house war feeling within the guilds, but also it's them not just against each other, but against the current political leader, and the way that religion and old magic versus new all is vying for power, how they're all vying for power. And within all of that, you're seeing how the masses are kind of swept up and whoever is promising them equal treatment, but really nobody has the interests of the masses in mind. They're really only looking at how they can use the masses to their advantage against a different force. And so you follow, as noted, the Hawksburg Guild. It is this family where you have 3 adult children and the matriarch, their mother, as well as a 5th perspective that enters the picture within the first book. In the second book, the houses of the guilds, I'll say, expands, and then in the third book, everything really comes to a head. If you like the idea of epic fantasy with sprinkles of what feels like steampunk and that technology versus magic feel, and also just having moments that really feel like no one really has a firm grasp on the magic of this world at all, and that creates a level of suspense. If you like all these ideas, there's a decent chance you will like this series. It's very action-packed, and I've said before, it's not the most moving of stories, but it is very cool. Speaking of cool, next up we have Godkiller. I have said many times that this story feels very similar in its setup to the Witcher series, except for rather than the main character being a monster hunter, they are a hunter of gods. So within their society, the gods fought against each other, and they're not just gods in the typical way that we see within fantasy, these all-powerful beings or beings that have a specific kind of focus, like the god of thunder or something like that. It's not quite like that. You have gods that have a lot of power, and then you have tiny, tiny, tiny little gods. And each god does have something that they tend to represent, and also people that worship them grant them power. The more they are worshipped, the more powerful they become. And so you would think this would be like a symbiosis where if they are worshiping them, they get more power, and then in turn, they reward them. But oftentimes, the gods were taking advantage of people, or they didn't really have a firm understanding of humanity, and thus they actually wreaked a lot of chaos. And when they fought each other, that was also very deadly for a lot of mankind. So you had this king that made it their goal to basically eliminate the sway that the gods had within the land of mankind. However, while that did bring about an age of peace for the most part, there are still a lot of people that have a desire to worship the gods. Enter our main character, who has the approval of basically the government to go around and eliminate any remaining gods or any that start to pop up. So she is paid, as I noted, it's similar to Witcher, it's similar to how he is a monster hunter. She is paid to hunt down these gods, but she is not loved whatsoever by the general population. They despise her, they look down at her, even though you could argue that her job keeps them safe. They also are just disgusted with the fact that she is this lone vagabond type figure. So that is our main character, and then she gets roped into this protector relationship with this young girl who has this bond with a god. And typically these sorts of bonds do not exist, but she cannot remove herself from this god, and she seeks out our protagonist in an effort to try and remove this, even though it's almost like an animal companion relationship. Even though they care about each other, they can't really live freely from one another, and their only hope is to ask this person who typically kills gods if she can help them figure out how to separate from one another. I do think that there's a lot to this that kind of has a really, really interesting setup, a cool world, a lot of lore, and it does it in a very efficient way where it's not something that's 900 pages, 1,000 pages, although just from the synopsis alone, it sounds like it could be. But I do feel like this author is very gifted at putting a lot of information in a short amount of time and also endearing you to the characters. There's also an entire other character I didn't even bring up, and just kind of seeing this almost found family feel within this is actually quite heartwarming with the backdrop of this very deadly world. And then last for today, we have a self-pub series that is ongoing, and it would be Songs of Chaos. The first book is Ascendant. I've mentioned this many times since picking it up. It is kind of the quintessential A Boy and His Dragon type of story. You follow this young boy who at the beginning of the story stumbles upon, and there's more to it, it's not just quite that simple, but I'll say he stumbles upon a dragon egg and then ends up raising it. This is an egg that was meant to be destroyed because they had a feeling that this dragon would somehow be defective. And it turns out there is something that makes this dragon different from the other dragons that are used within war and combat. And it's that difference that really shines for it and our character. And seeing the way that they come together and they have this bond with one another is really wholesome and lovely. But they are naturally from the very beginning of their relationship in danger. And then also there is this threat of these other beings that are wreaking havoc on their world. And it kind of separates our main character from everything he's ever known. And he is being forced to grow up very fast. And him and his dragon, they kind of only really have each other. And they're just trying to make it in the world. It's, like I said, truly, truly feels like classic, quintessential A Boy and His Dragon storytelling. I am so excited to see how the story continues. And one thing I want to state too is that I think that this is one of those stories that it really allows you to just sort of sit with the characters. It's not always going to be action-packed, it's not always going to be super fast-paced, but it is always going to allow you to sit alongside them. So, for example, our main character, sometimes him and the dragon, are just trying to cook food together, figure out what food the dragon likes the most, and they hunt together. And it almost has the same feeling a lot of people get from cozy fantasy. And I know there's different kinds of cozy fantasy, so even though that's a subgenre, I would say you could break it down even from there, because we have contemporary cozy fantasy or you have romantic cozy fantasy. But I do think there's something to like almost the Travis Baldree style cozy fantasy. I'm not saying that these are similar, but there is that feeling of just getting lost in a fantasy world. And I think that this story has that feeling very much within it. As stated at the beginning, I did do a part 1, so if you're interested in more recommendations in this style, I'll have that linked. If you'd like to mention any of your own recommendations of books that have come out over the last few years that maybe are just not as publicized, then feel free to mention those. If you're interested in any of these, I will have them linked as well. But anyway, thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you later. Bye.